Hey y'all, everybody's favorite bumpkin here. I have news, and it's good news. Mach Cleetus lives, y'all. Couple of things I ran across while I was doing the carbs on this bike, and you'll have to forgive me, okay? I'm a little bit bleary, I'm a little coffee dependent right now because I kind of pulled a late nighter on this thing last night because I was at a point where I needed this motorcycle to run. Unfortunately, I don't want to wake the neighbors, so to speak, because this bike, it's not the loudest thing on the planet, but then again, it's not exactly what you would call stealthy either. So out of respect for my neighbors, I got it to basically give me a fart and a promise, and I figured I'd put a pin in it until today. So here we are. Okay, now I know a lot of you guys had asked about the ultrasonic process on this thing whenever, I showed you guys, hey, we got this big buzz box here that shakes all the crap out of everything. It works good, okay? Now, I'm still kind of getting dialed in on this, but I think the results fairly well speak for themselves. I mean, them's pretty, them's clean, them's sparkly. And the thing is, they're like that inside and out. And, yeah, it does a pretty good job. Now, so far, I'm fairly well impressed with the ultrasonic. As far as the amount of crap that it was able to shake loose out of these carbs, even after I did my traditional soda blast cleaning method on these, I'm kind of having some growing pains with this stuff on the same page, though. And this is strictly my fault because, much to my beloved wife Unit's chagrin, I have this uncanny ability to be able to fall asleep anywhere at any time. And that kind of bit me in the ass here. I had these carbs, I had them all stripped down, had all the parts in some parts baskets, and I had them in the ultrasonic, and I was like, wow, that looks good, man. I'm going to run one more cycle on them, and I'm going to call it quits. Well, that's when old age, gray hair, and caffeine deficiency caught up with me, and my bumpkin ass fell asleep out here in the shop. And it's not the first time. Definitely not the second time. It happens. Anyways, the problem with that is on the particular ultrasonic that I bought, the ultrasonic, the buzz part of it, that has a 30-minute timer. It shuts off whenever 30 minutes is up. The heater, though, does not. My dumb bumpkin ass fell asleep out here in the garage. They were cooking in the brew over in the ultrasonic for, I'd say probably about 2.5 hours after the timer kicked off before I woke up and was like, oh shit. Yeah, I had one of those moments. So the aluminum on these carbs is significantly darker than what it was whenever I ran them through the first batch, okay? Now, that's not going to affect anything. That's not a structural defect, but from a cosmetic standpoint, they ain't as pretty as what they used to be. And I was tempted, I was that damn close from, fat kids rage quitting on this thing and throwing them back in the blast cabinet to strip them down to where I could make them all pretty and sparkly again. And then I thought to myself, self, you're just making more work because it ain't got to be pretty. It's just got to be right. And they are definitely right. Okay, now I know you guys had some questions on these carbs based on what I was telling you, what I found when I broke them down and did the autopsy on it. Now, I thought about doing a big piece on the building and reconditioning process on these carburetors, but then I got to thinking about it. The info on these carbs is somewhat unique and specialized to this particular make and model motorcycle, and it's not that beneficial to the vast majority of everybody out there that may be trying to get a toehold into the world and figure out their own stuff. So in lieu of that, I'm just going to give you guys kind of a brief overview of what I found here, okay? Well, let's see here. 2 strip float bowl screw holes that required a helicoil to fix. 3 strip carb cap screw holes that required helicoils to fix. Float levels that were up and down and all over the place. Basically, if you put them into a line graph, it would look like the Dow Jones. And also had some interesting stuff pop up because apparently, especially you guys over on the Patreon, you guys remember when I put this up there, somebody had replaced one of the carb slides in this bike once upon a time way back when. Don't know when, don't know why. All I know is they replaced it because these carbs have a Dynajet Stage 1 jet kit installed in them. And it's Dynajet proprietary needles. It's got, and the one thing that makes it very identifiable as Dynajet is Dynajet supplies a main air jet restrictor that you have to press into the main jet air bleed in the entrance of the carburetor. That's the dead giveaway. That's how I knew they were Dynajet. Also, Dynajet has you drill an additional lift hole in the bottom of the carb slide to help the slide lift faster. And one of these things was not like the other. They forgot to drill the lift hole in the slide, y'all. Yeah, I'll put a picture of that in here real quick just to kind of give y'all a heads up. Insert picture here. So anyway, Dynajet's actually pretty decent about sharing information on their website about their products, particularly their jet kits, their baseline settings, step-by-step process. They've got all their install guides listed as a PDF format based on year, make, and model of your vehicle. So if you've got something where you're pretty sure that it came from them, you can go on there and you can look at their install instructions, and it'll have the jet sizes listed. It'll also give you a starting reference point for needle clip height. That'll give you a little bit better idea to nail it down if you're buying into something that's a second-hand bike, or if you're getting a hold of something you don't really know the history behind. So needless to say, jumped on Dynajet's website. It's got their starting jet size recommendations on there, their starting needle clip height recommendations on there, and they also provided the size of that drill bit that I needed for drilling out that additional slide lift hole in the one odd duct slide we had. And that was handy, yeah, and something else is also handy as well. Sometimes it pays to be a hoarder, guys. I've had this thing kicking around on the shelf for probably 3-4 years at the shop now. Yeah, it's a Dynajet jet kit for a ZX-11D. Paper instructions. The more you know. So this is what I put together to try out, just for startsies, if you will. Pretty simple, easy to make. You can get the components for it anywhere. Step 1, add water. No, we're not baking a cake, we're cleaning carbs, but you know, that's kind of where the process starts. If you got hard water like I do in my neighborhood, my water here at the house is hard enough, it's got street cred, okay? So what I did, just to play it safe, I bought a couple of gallons of distilled water to start out with, just to where I didn't have any hard minerals or anything like that that may interact with the aluminum or the plating on some of the hardware on this stuff, just where I could eliminate it as a variable. Step 2, this stuff right here. This LA's Totally Awesome Cleaner Degreaser. This stuff's cheap, and you can find it anywhere. They keep it at Walmart, they keep it at Dollar Tree, Family Dollar, and places like that. You know, they keep it as well. But it's cheap, man. I bought a couple of these little squirt bottle things because I needed a couple of spray bottles for here in the temple. I'll leave you guys a link in the description down below. Now, my formula for mixing that stuff is I had 2.5 gallons of distilled water, because my ultrasonic, it holds not quite 4 gallons. It's about 3 3/4, but you got to make sure you got room for all your parts in there. So I had 2.5 gallons of distilled water. I had 2 quarts of the LA Totally Awesome cleaner, so that brings me up to 3 gallons. And then I used 2 tablespoons of this stuff. Lemon Shine. It's dishwashing detergent booster. Basically, all this is granulated citric acid. And you can tell I've had this bottle kicking around in the garage out here for a very long time. Now, I've got a prettier bottle in the house that I use for the dishwasher. This is the shop bottle. The reason I have this stuff on hand is it is a very good metal brightener, and I use it for other hobbies that I have, and it makes cylindrical brass thingamabobs sparkle and clean up very, very well. And it does an extremely good job in a rotary tumbler with stainless steel chips in there. You guys, if you know, you know. So I got the carbs back together, put them on the bike, and that's when I noticed I had a wee bit of a problem here and there with the fuel lines. They were ancient, they were hard as a rock. So all that got shit canned. We put new hose, new filter, all that stuff on here. You know, I mean, do it once, do it right, you don't have to worry about it again. Sorry, y'all, slight sidebar here. That's the battery that was in Mach Cleetus. AGM power that lasts from Tuckeraki, Bike Master. Well, that's not exactly the case, because I cranked on this thing for a grand total of about 0.78 seconds, and then it went and it pooped itself. 8-year-old Shirai lithium battery to the rescue. Thing's been sitting on the shelf for about 2.5 years now without being charged, so I figured I'd spoil it just a little bit, and I actually charged this thing last night to make sure it was topped up. And guess what? It still works. Tell you what, guys, the lithium batteries, definitely a good investment. It's a little bit more money on the front side, but you will not regret it. Okay, see? New fuel hose. Pretty. Got pretty little clamps and all that. Now, you got to pay attention to your routing on this. Originally, these two lines came down, and they basically made a big T shape with a three-way connector, and it went down, and it had a formed line that went down to the fuel pump itself here. Had a hard 90-degree bend that was molded in it. Now, I can't pick one of those things up at 1 o'clock in the morning anywhere, so what I did is I just scooted that over a little bit, and I arranged it this way. That way I keep a nice gradual bend here and also a nice gradual bend here. That way I don't have to be concerned with the fuel line collapsing on itself and pinching off and restricting flow. Now, normally you guys will hear me poo-poo paper element fuel filters on a carbureted motorcycle. This is a caveat to that, and I'll tell you why. Electric fuel pumps are far more capable of pushing fuel rather than pulling fuel. They do a far better job at making pressure rather than they do making suction. However, as big as that filter is and as much volume as it has in it, since it's on the suction side, and also since we're considerably lower than what our fuel level is going to be on our gas tank, I'm not concerned about this thing starving for fuel. Also, another reason is these bikes had a paper element fuel filter on the inlet side of the fuel pump from the factory. So that means I know I can get away with it because the guys that built the thing did it before I did. So in a nutshell, if it doesn't work, it's their fault. Okay, now if you guys have got a carbureted motorcycle that has an electric fuel pump on it, kind of like this one, you may be aware of this, you may not. All carbureted motorcycles that came equipped with a impulse type electric fuel pump like this, they're all set up in a manner where the fuel pump does not get energized and it does not run, at least for more than just a couple of seconds, if it's got a prime relay in the mix somewhere. These do not run unless the motor's running and the CDI box is sending a tack signal out that energizes this fuel pump. They do that for safety reasons, to keep the pump from just running continuously if somebody forgets to leave or forgets to turn the key off. And if you have a problem with the carburetor, it keeps carbs from running over and creating a lake of gasoline in your garage. That's not a good thing. Now, it's also kind of a bad thing if you just crank the snot out of the damn bike trying to get fuel from your fuel source, fuel tank, remote bottle, in my case here, up to the carburetors. Because these things are thirsty, and we got a lot of volume in the pump and the hoses and the filter and the carb bowls that we got to fill up before we can even get gas into the motor. Here's how you get around that. Most of these style of fuel pumps are going to have a simple 2-wire connection. Some of you Honda guys, it may have 4. Anyway, simple way of doing it, the ground lead that goes to this fuel pump, it's always going to be a hard chassis ground. So take you a little piece of jumper wire here. Ain't got to be anything fancy. Doesn't have to be special. Now make sure you're on your positive side of your fuel pump, not the ground side, or else you're going to create your own check engine light here when this guy goes nuclear and smokes all the insulation off of it. And then it's going to start singing, "This little light of mine, I'm going to let it shine," for about 2 seconds, and then it's going to go poof. We don't want that. Now, I took this piece of scrap wire that just happened to have this male terminal here that I can use as a back probe pin and just go into the back side of the connector for the fuel pump here on the hot lead. Now, I've already got my fuel bottle turned on there, and if you guys look down here in the bottom corner of the screen, down here where I'm pointing, you can see just a little bit of the fuel filter down there. Keep an eyeball on that because you'll see it filling up with fuel. You just take your jumper lead here, put it to the hot side of the battery. Hear that? Yeah, fuel pump's empty. It's not empty anymore. When that clicking slows down like that, that means your pump's primed up, your fuel system's primed up, and also you got fuel up in your carburetors. You can use this as a sanity check before you even try to start the bike because it allows you to check to make sure that you've got your float height set correctly, and also that you don't have any trash in the float needles and seats that may cause carbs to overrun, and you end up wasting a lot of time, or worse, have a potential problem that's going to come back to bite you in the ass later on down the road. All right, so we got fuel. What about spark? Well, we're covered down on that too. I'll put you a picture down here in the bottom corner of this video to where you can see what we did there. But basically, we substituted the original stock coils that had the wires and the plug boots and all that, and that took up a whole hell of a lot of real estate. We've substituted those with a set of stick coils from a late model ZX-10 Ninja. Very simple to wire in, very easy to install, and it makes for a whole lot more workable space under the hood, so to speak, whenever you put the air box and the tank back on, because you don't have to fight around the coils and the plug wires. See this? They don't live here anymore. Now, that's not to say that those parts are bad, because they're not. They work perfectly fine. But I had the opportunity to get a little bit of a free upgrade out of this and also simplify things a little bit along the way, so I figured, why not? We got fuel, we got fire. Let's see what happens. I will take that all damn day. Okay, so it runs, it lives, it makes proper motorcycle sounds. It endangers small children that gets close enough to the carburetors whenever you've got the airbox off of, because they are big and they'll get sucked in and spit out the damn tailpipe. If you guys remember a tool video that we did a while back about my bargain basement carb gauges here, y'all will remember that these things are kind of fiddly, and it's kind of hard to get them dialed in to where, you know, you can actually read them without really being on the ball, because the needles bounced around quite a bit and it didn't have real good adjustment on that. Pretty sure I come up with a low buck fix for that. Here, I'm going to show you what we did. Yeah, see? They bounce around like they've had a few too many Red Bulls. Here's how we're going to get around that. Now, the quick and dirty fix for this that I come up with, it's a lot simpler than what I originally thought. Originally, I was thinking about taking some pilot jets, you know, all four of them being the same size, and pushing those into the hose here where it connects to the gauge body to act as a restrictor. Some of the old Mercury stick style carb gauges, they actually gave you these things in a package, and it looked suspiciously like a pilot jet back in the day. But found something that's a little bit simpler. You notice these little gray blobs right here at the bottom of the main body of the carb gauge? Well, they're not just a blob. If you guys have got an aquarium, you'll know exactly what these are. Yeah. See, it's an air metering valve for an aquarium air line. And it's pretty simple. Doesn't really matter which way the air comes in or out, but the end of this thing is threaded, and it's got a little rubber cap in there that will slowly constrict down, and eventually it'll shut off the flow of air through it. Well, if it's shutting off airflow, it's going to do the same thing with vacuum, and that's what we're dealing with here. So let's turn this thing on and see if we can dial all the mad bounce and flutter out of these things that makes them look like they've had a few too many double lattes. Oh, there we go. And the cool thing is, doing it with this, you still got your original adjustment on the gauge body itself, to where you can do your fine adjustment, to where you can just see that little bit of twitch and it takes all the bounce out of it. That way you can see exactly where your needles are falling at. Great success. Now, it may be a little difficult for you guys to hear over the engine noise right now, but if you look closely, you'll see we've got just the tiniest bit of twitch on the tips of those gauge needles, but they're all actively reading, because watch this whenever I reach up and turn the bike off. See? They're all pulling vacuum, but it takes all the bounce out of them. That way we can read what they are and what they're doing and which cylinder we need to adjust. That way we can get it dialed. Okay, gang, so we got the bike up and running. It didn't puke its guts out all over the lift, and it's moving oil and it's moving coolant. It's keeping its cool, and it's doing everything it's supposed to do, and none of the bad stuff that we all dread whenever we're picking up a bike and we don't have any knowledge on the prior history of it. Now, we got to set the carbs on this, get them synced, get them balanced up. We got to set the idle mixture. Remember, you always do that at operating temp. Let this thing run, let the fan cycle at least once. That way you can make sure it's going to behave. And also, mental note to self, buy a bigger fuel bottle, because this little popcorn fart thing here, it ain't going to get it done. That's approximately 1.5 to 2 minutes of idling here in the shop. And you can see how much this thing drank out of there. She's a thirsty girl. Yeah, I'm going to have to find a cooling fan for it. Slight footnote here, guys. I just got reminded about a blast from the past about a popular mod that was almost an essential for these bikes, and also ZX-11s way back in the day. Cooling fan kicked on the first time, and I wasn't really paying that much attention to it, but it kicked on again while I was setting the carbs up on this thing. And look here. It's a little melty. Yeah. That was kind of a common issue that these bikes had way back when, whenever you'd put an aftermarket exhaust on them, because it moved the exhaust headers closer to the cooling fan. And if that cooling fan happened to stop in just the right spot, and when you parked the bike, and especially if it was hot, the radiant heat coming off the exhaust would eventually melt the blades on the fan, like this one's starting to do. So I am going to be on the hunt for a replacement cooling fan for this unit, but in the meantime, I am going to watch diligently and pay attention. Sorry guys, I had to pause for just a second where I could open up the back door of the temple here and let things air out a little bit. It's a wee bit windy out today, and our totally organic, non-GMO, gluten-free, Bluetooth, totally analog weather forecasting Dr. Seuss palm trees in the back here, they will attest to that fact. Right now, they're going between this and this, with a lot of this in between. So it's a little breezy today. Had to let the shop air out so I didn't poison myself or the beloved wife unit over here. Carbon monoxide ain't no joke, guys. Pay attention to what you're doing, all right? Don't kill any brain cells. Okay, now for the folks of sharp eye out there in the audience, you may have noticed whenever I showed you the picture of that melted cooling fan, the conspicuous absence, if you will, of the secondary air injection valves and the reed valves and all the plumbing on the top of the valve cover. There's a reason for that, because they ain't there anymore. Now, full disclosure here, guys. This bike's over 25 years old. It no longer has to conform to any kind of EPA regulation or state regulation, for that matter, concerning emissions control devices. Now, that being said, hypothetically, in a world where people didn't poo-poo the notion so hardly, this stuff right here, all this is the air divert valve, this is the vacuum tubing that supplied vacuum to this air divert valve, and these were the hoses that went down to these reed valves that mount in the valve cover. And what these do is, when you are at high RPM and you close the throttle, it allows additional fresh air to be injected directly into the exhaust port of the cylinder head. And the goal there was to reduce tailpipe emissions. That's all well and good, and trust me, I'm all for leaving a better planet for our kids and grandkids, because God knows they're going to have a hard enough road to hoe on their own whenever we're gone from this little mud ball called Earth, okay? However, since this stuff is injecting fresh air that contains oxygen into the exhaust system that's really, really damn hot, and it's got a little bit of unburnt fuel in there, not much, but just a wee bit, this is what causes 90% of all of your decel popping on a metric motorcycle. Harley doesn't use this system. Metric bikes, oh yeah, they use it aplenty. All the manufacturers have used it in one shape, form, or fashion on various different models throughout the years. The easy way to get around this, to where you're not having to pay a bunch of money for some stupid block-off plates, which all they are is just a fancy piece of aluminum with a couple of holes drilled in it that you bolt on in place of the covers here for that originally secured the reed valves into the valve cover. The easy fix for this: take all of your emissions plumbing off, block off all your vacuum taps where they used to go to the intake manifolds, carburetors, whatever, because they're only supplying vacuum at a specific time. These guys right here, if you don't block these off, you're going to have one hell of a weird noise coming from underneath the gas tank. And what that is you're actually hearing the exhaust system pull fresh air in past this reed valve. And that reed valve basically is exactly what it sounds like. These work and function just like a induction reed on a two-stroke motor. It allows air to come in, but it doesn't allow air to come back out. Now, in a perfect world, it would work that way. In the real world, you're always going to hear a little bit of a vacuum leak from it. Not a vacuum leak, rather, but an exhaust leak, and you hear this weird fluttering noise. So that's why you take these, after you pull the rubber hoses out of them, these are sized just right to where you can put a 3/8 NPT pipe tap down them to get some threads in them, put a pipe plug in there with a little bit of red Loctite just to hold it in place and make sure it doesn't go anywhere, and then bolt them back into the valve cover. You got to seal the hole up somehow, but past that, problem solved. And what'd you spend? A couple of bucks on a pair of brass plugs at Lowe's? Yeah, you're done. Now, if you are in a state or municipality that requires emissions control devices to be left in place, or God forbid if you're in the state of California, Stan, do not do this. Do not do this whatsoever. Don't even think about doing this, or else the spirit of Gavin Newsom and Greta Thunberg will show up at your door and go, "How dare you?" And just for the people that are curious how in the hell I got away with blocking those holes up without putting pipe plugs in those covers like I did, I had the valve cover off, and the channel in the valve cover itself on this particular model, it just so happens to be sized perfectly to where you can take a M8 threaded set screw, run a tap down in the hole where it goes into the exhaust port, thread it in, and it blocks it up perfect, nice, neat, and simple. You ain't got to worry about it. So that's what I did. Okay, so we got it up and running. We got our carbs balanced out here as far as carb sync goes. Now, you guys may notice something conspicuously missing here. That would be the air box. Now, I know you guys have always heard me harp. Don't ever try to set carbs whenever you don't have everything in place as far as the intake system goes. Air filter, air box, all that. Slight caveat to that, and this is one of them, okay? The way the air box is configured on this bike, there is no way whatsoever that you can get to the balance screws in between the carburetors when they're assembled on the bike. So on these bikes, you got to do things a little differently. You set your throttle sync, as far as your base idle sync, you set that when you can get to the carb screws and whatnot to where you can actually adjust it to set your carb sync. However, after that, then you have to reinstall your air box with the air filter and all the ducting and everything connected and hooked up. Then you can set your idle mixture for idle quality. Those are two distinctly different things. Now, typically what I do on these bikes whenever I get a hold of one of them, I'll leave my hoses laid up here because they're flexible enough that I can squeeze them underneath the air box, and the air box itself isn't terribly difficult to get in and out of this thing whenever you got the fuel tank off. The fuel tank is the booger bear here. What I'll do is I'll leave my gauges on the bike, put everything together, set my idle mixture. That way I can make sure that I've got good idle quality and good response, but at the same time, I can watch my gauges. If I need to make small tweaks to the sync screws, I can do it then without having to backtrack. Because sometimes, whenever you make an adjustment on idle mixture, that will cause a cylinder to create a little more or a little less vacuum on one specific cylinder. So it always pays to cover your bases. Don't just assume that it's a one and done deal. Go back and verify. Okay, you guys remember from last week's video, we put a manual cam chain tensioner in this thing? I'm going to show you real quick like how you adjust that whenever the bike's running. Now the bike's fully up to operating tip right now. This is where you want to adjust it at. But it's like I was saying in last week's video, okay? It's pretty simple. Start the bike up. We've got it running at a hot base idle here. Everything's warmed up. We're fully up to temp. Then take your wrench. While you're holding the adjuster bolt, you want to back off your lock bolt. And you want to back that out very slowly until the point where you just hear the cam chain start clacking. I'm going to get my mic a little closer here and see if maybe you guys can pick it up. I hope it can. I can't make any guarantees though. Enter microphone number 2. Now hopefully it'll pick it up. But right about there, you start hearing that little bit of a rattle. When you start hearing that little faint rattle, you run your adjuster bolt in ever so slightly, very slowly, until you hear the rattle go away. That's when you know you're good. Then at that point, you take your wrench while you're holding your adjuster bolt, take your wrench, lock down the lock nut. There you have it, guys. That's how you adjust a manual cam chain tester. Now let me get you a little closer here, and I want to show you something. If you look really, really close, you see that black spot. That's the roll pin that anchors that nut on the head of the adjuster bolt. Now, when I first started this and backed that out, or started to back it out rather, that black spot was approximately right here. So we were really damn close from the jump on this. I only moved that 1/6 of a turn. That's one flat on the adjuster bolt. And I actually loosened it ever so slightly from where we initially set it up at. Doesn't take a whole lot. Okay, if you guys have been keeping a sharp eye on this video up to this point, you may be asking yourself, why in the hell is he running weed eater gas in this damn ZX-11? Well, two reasons. Number one, it's what I had handy. I didn't have any straight gas. Besides, this is only mixed 50-1. 2 3/4 of an ounce of two-stroke oil in every gallon of gasoline, that ain't gonna amount to jack. Number two, because it's blue. All the cool kids know that grape's the best flavor of Kool-Aid. Okay, bullshit aside, there's a reason why I like running bikes off of two-stroke gas, especially if they're an older bike like this that's set and potentially laid dormant for a little while. That extra bit of lubrication that you get from the oil that is mixed in with your weed eater gas or two-stroke gas, snowmobile gas, dirt bike gas, whatever the case may be, that will do two things. One, it gives you just a little bit of additional lubrication to kind of help free things up that may be a little sticky on the top end, such as rings, valves, valve guides, valve seals, things like that. But number two, it also helps soften some of that stuff to where if you got a lot of accumulation or a lot of buildup inside of a motor, basically if it's constipated and got a case of the craps, it helps limber all that stuff up to where it can, you know, evacuate it. Hey y'all, everybody's favorite bumpkin here. No, what you're seeing right now is not an editing mistake, it's not a goof, and it's not a computer fuck up, okay? Where we left off on this thing yesterday, after a little bit, I kind of had to walk away because I had that little voice, you know, that self-preservation thing that goes on in the back of your head that says, hey, dummy, stop while you're ahead. So I figured for once in a while, it's a good thing to pay attention to that. So that's what I did. And I'm kind of glad I did because honestly, I've had a hell of a lot going on here lately. Between the YouTube channel, the new Discord site, also just work and life in general, I got a lot of balls up in the air that I'm juggling around, and I've still got to make some parts for a customer's bike at the Ride Factory tonight here at the home shop because it's some little bitty stuff. And it's actually easier for me to do that here in my home shop on my tooling that I have here than setting it up on the big Gigantor Bridgeport machine that I've got at the Ride Factory. You guys know the General. I mean, hey, he's a cranky old bastard that's 2,000 pounds worth of pea soup green painted cast iron and steel. It may have been built in 1946, but by God, he puts in some good work. But every now and then, it's a little easier to kind of scale things down. So here we are again today, and I'm feeling a little bit better. I've had my 7th cup of coffee for the day, so I'm mostly online. And then considering my culinary development was stunted at the 2nd grade level after I made myself a gourmet lunch of peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. And, well, you know. So anyway, we're clicking on about 6 3/4 of 8 cylinders right now. So let's get back into Mach Cleetus here. Let's get these damn carbs done up, okay? Stick around. Now, you guys will remember yesterday where we left off with this. We had our baseline synchronization set on the carbs as far as, you know, the rough end, if you will. But I got to put the air box back in here real quick. That way we can set our idle mixture. That way we can get our idle quality back. But at the same time, I'm going to go ahead and leave my gauges in place. That way, if I need to make small tweaks to the throttle sync based on changes that may be incurred by me adjusting the idle mixture screws, I still got all my gear on there to where I can make a little tweak here and there as necessary. Most of the time, whenever I'm in the shop here jamming out, I'm either listening to radio, something on YouTube. Right now, I'm listening to an audiobook right now. It's on Patrick Predator's YouTube page. It's called Forever Midnight, and it's a very interesting spin on the whole Yachtwa lore as far as the backstory and a sidebar to the Predator universe, if you will. Y'all look him up. Give it a listen, okay? It's not your normal, Alien versus Predator, Yachtwa, whatever, but it's a damn good read. All right, just to give you guys a heads up here. The factory foam type air filters, there's nothing wrong with these, okay? Don't sell these things short. Don't toss it out thinking that you need a K&N air filter, because I'll let you know a little secret. The K&N filter does not filter as good as what these do, okay? The big difference is on a K&N filter, they are basically cotton gauze that's held up in a wire mesh. The factory's type foam air filter, not necessarily the factory Kawasaki filter, but the factory spec filter, they're a dual layer foam filter. You guys that do a lot of off-road stuff, you're familiar with Uni and Twin Air. Same principle. You got a coarse outer layer here where all the dirty air hits first, and that catches the big chunks and squirrels, things like that. Then you've got a fine inner layer, and this is with the side that actually filters out the majority of all the real small particulate and stuff that's going to cause the majority of your engine wear. Now, whenever you guys service these things, my Fat Ninja reflexes paid off right then because this fell off the shelf while I was talking. Ha! Anyway, while you guys are servicing these things, the easy, cheap way to clean these, go to the kitchen, grab some Dawn dishwashing soap, squeeze it on this when it's dry, knead it in, work it in, kind of gentle-like, and then rinse it out with some hot water, the hottest water you can stand. Rinse it out until it's clean and clear, it's not making any more bubbles, and then squeeze it out. Try not to blow it out with compressed air, but just squeeze out the excess. You can prop it up in front of a fan, lay it out in the sun, whatever. Then, after that, you've got to oil it. Now, the one thing that I like using, I've used for a long damn time, is the Fab one from Maxima. This stuff sprays on real thin and watery because it's got a solvent carrier that evaporates out after a few minutes, but that gives it time to creep in and get into the filter where it's going to do the most good. But when the solvent evaporates out, that lets it stay put. It doesn't get sucked out of a filter, and it doesn't drain out. Matter of fact, whenever I'm servicing K&N air filters on bikes at the Ride Factory and also bikes that I have come to the temple here, this is what I use in place of the K&N air filter oil. I know I've had a couple of guys ask me about this here recently. This is the stuff, okay? This catches everything. It cuts pretty easily with water. Well, not strictly water. Dawn dish soap, again, that's like the world's degreaser. But it cuts out real good whenever you got to clean the filter again. In this instance, I got this as a combo pack that was graciously donated to me at the last camp out by one of the viewers of the channel. Thank you. Appreciate the hell out of that. It came with the Maxima air filter cleaner. Now, honestly, I've never used this stuff, so I'm going to go take it for a test drive and see what it does. I'll let you know. Okay, well, the test drive report, if you will, on the Maxima air filter cleaner, it ain't bad, but it's not great, and I'll explain why. This stuff is extremely similar to how it cleans and how it behaves to another product that Maxima makes called Cleanup, and it's an all-purpose degreaser, heavy-duty chain gack remover. It's a really good product. It's amazing stuff. It cleans, it cuts through grease real well, it doesn't beat paint up, and plus it rinses clean and it doesn't leave any film behind. And I really like that stuff. The only downside is it's a little bit on the spendy side. So honestly, whenever I use this can up, probably ain't going to spend the money on it again, because for air filters, hey, Dawn dish soap, I got it aplenty, and it's right there in the kitchen. Speaking of, let me go grab a special tool real fast, and I'll show you guys how I go about oiling air filters to where I get them oiled and I get everything covered, but I don't get them loaded down with oil to the point to where it starts choking up and causing a restriction. There's a balance point there, guys. Special tool, courtesy of Publix. Walmart works just as well, because you know how they love to give you those damn bags all the time. Okay, now like I said, this stuff sprays out real thin and watery, and then it gets sticky. It tacks up. That way it stays in place. And that's a good thing as far as the filter goes. Not so much for your personal out level, okay? Because honestly, if you get this stuff on your hands, you know, after it sets up and gets sticky, it kind of feels like you did something fairly immoral with a moose. I mean, and let me tell you, you ain't gonna wipe this stuff off on a shop rag, guys. I mean, you gotta take a shop rag and spray it down with some carb cleaner, or you gotta go and hit the Gojo bucket, one of the two, because you can't wash this shit off. So here, on a dual layer filter like this, what I do is I oil the rough side first. And don't be afraid of giving it a kind of a heavy coat, okay? Spray it down, oil it really heavy. Well, not real heavy, but you get the idea. Give it a good overall coat. We're not going to worry about oiling the inside portion of it though, because what we're doing is we're taking all the oil from the rough side, and then we're going to take this filter and fold it over on itself to where we're squeezing the oil into the fine side of the filter. I know this may be Motorcycle 101 for a lot of you guys, but we got a lot of viewers here. They're just starting out and they may not know some of this stuff. So, hey, be patient, y'all. Everybody's got to start somewhere. Okay, so you can see that our once yellow filter is now kind of a sickly sinus infection / baby shit green color. That means we got a decent amount of filter oil in there. So we're going to take it and we're going to fold it over on itself. Now here's where the Publix bag comes into play. Take your filter, take your plastic bag, then fold it in half, and then just for good measure, because Publix bags always have a hole in them somewhere, I'm going to stick it inside of another Publix bag, and then proceed to squeeze. Because what you're doing is you're squeezing and distributing that filter oil all throughout the filter. Whatever is excess that's going to get squeezed out of the filter is going to basically catch itself in the plastic bag. You know, when it's all said and done, by having this in the plastic bag, by the time the solvent out of the filter oil evaporates out, you're not going to be left feeling like you just gave a handy to Bigfoot, okay? I mean, yeah. I got a really high out factor, y'all, but that's one of those things, just, yeah, can't do that. Okay, Trojan layer number 1, gone. And Trojan layer number 2. Now, I know it's going to be kind of hard to see on the video, but you can see all the excess oil that got squeezed out of the filter and it wound up inside the plastic bag. And there we go. See the shiny? That's a really, really light film of oil that's saturated into the filter foam. I'm going to take this and lay it out in the sun to where it'll dry out for a little bit, and then I can put it in the air box when we get it assembled on the bike. Okay, we got the air box back in this thing. We're going to start it up. We're going to set our idle mixture, check our base idle, and also we're going to check our final sync after we make sure we got good idle quality out of it. Also, let me show you guys a little unexpected side benefit that I just blundered into whenever I was putting the air box back in this thing. Check us out. Okay, you remember all that smog crap I told you that we kind of forgot to put back on this bike? Yeah, well, guess what? A lot of it used to live right up in this space right here, and that's where you get to your vacuum lines for hooking up your vacuum gauges. So the cool thing is after we get this done, I don't have to pull the air box back off. All I got to have is some long needle nose pliers where I can get the vacuum caps back in there on the vacuum spigots on the intake manifolds. And speaking of vacuum caps, pro tip. That's the factory vacuum cap that blocks these things off. You know, the vacuum spigots on the intake manifolds. And you can see they're pretty thick rubber, but the thing is, these things are old, they're hard. One of them was split, and also I only had 2 because there were vacuum lines that went to the other 2 vacuum spigots because that was running all of our smog control stuff. That's where these guys come in. They look the same, they're not the same. These are silicone. They're high temp silicone, and the good thing is these things don't soften and they don't split, they don't harden up, and they don't dry rot like natural rubber does. I'll put you a link in the description on this video for these down there at the bottom. These are what you want because they last forever, and you don't have to worry about them going ejecto-ceto on you when you least expect it. Oh, it's a whole lot cleaner with that air box in there already. Got to turn my book off so I can hear what's going on. Show you guys my fancy new upgraded version of my screwdriver. It goes around the corner. Nifty little guy, huh? Now the head on this is a little bit bigger and clunkier than what on my traditional pilot screw adjusting tool is. If you look down deep inside there, see that little gear that's in there? Yeah, these things are actually gear driven, and they're all ball bearing, so they're really smooth and they're very sensitive. I like it so far. I will take that all day. Oh yeah, kids. Daddy happy. That smoke that you see in the background? Yeah, don't worry about that. Remember, we're running this thing on weed eater gas, okay? Besides, it's got a bunch of crap. It's got to get blown out of the system because I'm pretty sure this thing is loaded down with carbon in it right now from the cam timing being as far out of whack as it was. Okay, so cool. It runs. It makes motorcycle sounds. So at this point, I got to step away from all the go fast, sound good parts. I got to put all the bodywork back on this thing, gas tank, seat, the lowers, all that. We are going to put this thing on the ground, and we're going to ride it in full Mach Cleetus regalia, okay? Hell yeah, brother, all the way. Now, before I can do that, there's a couple things I got to do to make sure this thing's solid to ride. Number one, I still got to do all the fluid flushes on the brakes, coolant, all that stuff. Also, I've already changed oil in it, but I do want to go ahead and put a piece of cardboard under it, let it sit overnight while I'm doing everything else, just to make sure I don't have any little drippies here and there, okay? Also, we've got the basic dumbass simple stuff we got to do here. We got to check tires, we got to check the brakes, we got to make sure our brake calipers aren't hanging up, things like that, okay? That's important, y'all. That's the stuff that you need to think about whenever you're bringing one back from the dead, all right? Another evening worth of work, and we are to have our very own guided missile that we can drive around, y'all. Now, unfortunately, that video is going to have to wait for a later date and time, okay? Because that's going to be a video all on its own. Besides, I still got to go to the tag office, and I got to get a license plate on this thing. Because, I got the feeling I'm going to need it. Yeah. And that would be immoral and wrong and against the grain of polite society if I were to allegedly misplace a license plate from another vehicle that I have here and affix it to the back end of this motorcycle. That's bad. Don't do that. All right, cool. So it runs, it goes, it makes motorcycle sounds. Well, we don't know for a fact if it goes yet, but I got a good feeling and I'm going to take it on faith. Now, I do have a couple of things that I got to do that I'm not going to bore you guys with. I'm going to do those off camera. I want to put this thing down on the ground and ride it, okay? So in the meantime, I want to give a big shout out to all of the Patreon supporters, all the Patreon and Discord members, all the channel supporters. You guys are the people that make stuff like this possible, okay? Y'all give us here at JTMJ the ability to find these old bikes, or in the case of this bike, so graciously donate this bike to where we can put it back in its natural environment where it belongs. Because, you know, this thing, it's an iconic motorcycle from the history of years gone by, but deep down at its core, this bike's meant to be ridden. It's not a show pony. It's not something meant to be locked away in a museum somewhere and just left to rot in all of its splendor. This thing's happiest in its natural environment, hauling ass up and down the road and putting smiles for miles on everybody's face. Whether you're behind the bars or seeing it blast past you on a twisty back road, that's where this thing should live. Also, if you guys haven't already stopped by to check out the Patreon site and see what we're all about here at Joe the Mountain Jedi, hey, stop in there, because there's a lot of cool shit on that doesn't ever make it to YouTube, okay? I want to give you guys a heads up right here, right now. It costs $0. That's right, $0 to join my Patreon, okay? Now, as always, Patreon members and Patreon supporters, you are very much appreciated. And like I said, you guys are the ones that keeps the wheels going here and allows us to be able to move forward on projects like this, the ZL-900 Eliminator. Now, I got a couple others in the works. I ain't got them nailed down yet, but I got a good feeling on a few of them, okay? So let's see what the future brings. But before we kind of put the cart before the horse there, let's put the skins back on this thing and let's run her up and down the road and see what it does, okay? I'm probably like about 88.7% of the rest of you guys out there. I absolutely hate whenever somebody leaves a video or a book or a movie or a story of any kind on a cliffhanger ending. And I feel bad about doing that to you right now. But the thing is, number one, I got to make sure this bike's safe. Number two, I got to make sure it's legal, because I get the feeling I'm going to have a lot of eyeballs looking at this thing whenever it hits the ground, because whenever it hits the ground, it's going to hit the ground running. So ride video comes up next, y'all. Stay tuned for that. Oh, yeah, speaking of the Discord, that's something where a lot of people seem like they're having a hard time finding the link to be able to join the JTMJ Discord, okay? Go visit the Patreon site. The link for it's down here below in the description on this video, okay? The only reason we ask people to go through the Patreon site is that way we can control the quality and the intent of the people that join our Discord. To be honest with you, a lot of other Discord channels out there, you got a lot of people that's out there for all the wrong reasons. We're trying to grow a knowledge base. We're trying to build an educational library of sorts for motorcyclists, regardless of skill level or experience level, okay? So, that is why we ask people to go through the Patreon. It costs you nothing, but that's where you will find the link to the JTMJ Discord. Now, while you're there at Patreon, take a gander around. There's a lot of public posts up there. Check them out. See what we're all about. And if you elect to do so, if you do join up as a supporting Patreon member, there's a whole hell of a lot more stuff that is behind the scenes, if you will, that members get exclusive access to. Something to keep in mind, okay? Anyway, till next time, I love y'all. I'll catch you on the flip side, okay? See ya. Whew. Holy shit, this thing's going to be bad.
Force will be with you, always.